The Scottish painter Jack Vettriano has died.
In this video, I'm going to paint a strange portrait in tribute to one of the wealthiest and most celebrated living artists of recent generations. We are going to discuss why I think he died dissatisfied with his career, and what we, mere mortals, can learn from him. This is Jack in the Box.
I've never denied that that I would like recognition from the National Galleries of Scotland or Tate.
First, onto the portrait, my painting. When Jack Vettriano died, I knew I wanted to paint something to celebrate his life. And it couldn't just be a rip-off of a Jack Vettriano painting, nor could it be in his style. It had to honour art and the artists, both the subject Jack and the painter, me. So it had to be my style. You don't ask infamous surreal artist Salvador Dali for a painting, and then ask for a lacklustre reproduction of a bowl of fruit. When I'm in my element, I love to paint original ideas. When I was younger, the majority of my ideas were pulled from pure imagination, and some wild canvases have emerged over the decades. As the years pass by, I've picked up the brushes less, and the ideas are fewer and far between. But the process hasn't changed too much. My thought process is fairly quick. My only registered thought here was, paint Jack. In under 60 seconds, the concept for Jack in the Box was sketched on a post-it note. Maybe the ideas come too quickly, and my brain doesn't get a chance to perceive the computations, and I had to reverse engineer the idea to give it meaning. What is the significance? Why that composition? What's the viewer meant to feel? Why a toy? Is it disrespectful? Stick around and I'll answer all of these questions later. Why paint Jack? Why paint Jack Vettriano? Well, he resonates with me. Like him, I'm a self-taught Scottish artist from a working class background. And though I haven't reached his level of success, and I'm fairly confident I never will, but he's given me hope, the art of the possible. And I have to give it a go. When I heard of his passing on March the 1st, 2025 in his home in Nice, I was deeply saddened. He was arguably Scotland's most successful artist of all time, and now he'll never paint again. It's a wake-up call. Time is eternal, but our lives are not. My own opportunity for a career in art will soon run out one day. So I need to make the most of it, and carve out success with my paintbrushes while I can. So this portrait of Jack will be a small tribute, and a step forward in my own journey, a way to celebrate his resilience and hopefully claim a little exposure for myself along the way. There's no doubt in my mind that Jack's career was a triumph. He was a commercial success, he was a millionaire from the copyrights of images, he sold millions of prints, reportedly outselling the masters like Monet and Van Gogh. And his original work is owned by celebrities across the world, Jack Nicholson, Madonna, Robbie Coltrane and Sir Alex Ferguson, just to name a few. Yet somehow the critics relentlessly dismissed him, and Vettriano said, they can't forgive me for being successful. And although that might be a stubborn response, I do think it affected him, not having the critics on side. Us Scots are famed for being miserable and happy at the same time, so it can be a challenge to spot depression. Doer is the word. Over the years I've spotted a few articles where Jack expressed disappointment, sadness and even loneliness. And whilst I paint a daring portrait to celebrate Jack's life, I want to reflect on what we as artists and humans can learn from his journey, the highs and the lows. Because Jack's story isn't just about art. It's about ambition, rejection, self-worth and how success doesn't always feel the way we expect it to. And as this portrait takes shape, I want to explore that tension and ask myself, what does it really mean to be a successful artist? And how will I measure myself?
And I remember feeling almost breathless. And I don't think I painted for about 2 weeks because I felt like a sham.
I can't in any way claim to be a successful artist. But like most people, I measure success as income and popularity, even if I know that's flawed. But a question for you, who's more successful? Artist A, with the skill of an impressionistic master, but zero sales and little to no fan base? Or artist B, who drips wet paint onto canvas and regularly sells artwork through the Guggenheim? I get a feeling you instinctively said B, and I'm sure you're not alone. But what if I reframe that question? Who's more successful? Vicent van Gogh or Jackson Pollock? Because that's the names of the artist I just described in my example, and I suspect a lot of you now are cheering for artist A. The point is, success is arbitrary. One man's success is another man's failure. So you have to judge it by your own boundaries.
I had the gall to say that I don't like his pictures because they're about sex, which is absolute nonsense. I mean, I don't like his pictures because they're supposed to be about sex, but aren't. You know, they're about, well, they don't actually come to being about anything very much.
I've got the utmost respect for Duncan Macmillan. He is an expert in the history of Scottish art, but we should never imagine that that means he's got good taste.
Now, Vettriano was often criticised for painting romantic and sexual themes. Critics called his work shallow and tacky, but he stayed true to himself. Sure, he could have painted political commentary or coal miners to represent his roots to earn academic respect, but he chose not to. He held strong and painted what he wanted to paint, regardless of the overt sneers from the critics. Jack was rejected by the Edinburgh College of Art, dismissed by the press, and to this day, his work has not been accepted into the national galleries. Now with time, that may change, but I suspect it's not just Jack who needs to die. The gatekeepers who rejected his work may need to retire too.
It's a ridiculous way to try and do this, but do I feel like eyes would be a problem? Is this too much detail for this painting? Ah, dearie me, don't know what to do.
Sure, Jack was mighty popular with the public, and he had millions of pounds in the bank. But success isn't just measured with numbers. Jack, for me, was brave with his artwork. Perhaps without that, he'd have died with no commercial success. If he painted what the critics liked, he'd have likely died a nameless sheep, and that's what I believe. Bravery isn't always brash. Sometimes it's just painting what you believe in, even if some won't accept it as talent. And that's the kind of bravery I try to display in my own artwork. I'd rather be misunderstood by the many and loved by the very, very few.
People say to me, why don't you paint some gritty scenes of down the coal mines? And I say, Christ, the only people that romanticise about the coal mines are people that weren't there.
Jack's work always feels nostalgic to me, so the foreground features one of the most nostalgic emblems to me, a Polaroid. And on that Polaroid a picture of Methyl Power Station, a nod to Jack's roots, his father a miner, and Jack born Jack Hogan in 1951. Raised in the Scottish mining town of Methyl in Fife, in relative poverty, sharing a bed with his brother, working hard from the age of 10, delivering milk and newspapers, cleaning windows and anything he could earn some pennies. He was even a bingo caller, and I'm tempted to drop a bingo ball in the painting somewhere, but I've resisted so far. From rags to riches, the multi-millionaire artist. That's success, whether the galleries accept it or not.
So we have successfully identified Jack's cigarettes. They look like Marlboro.
For me, a painting should be a story. Each element means something. Of course, there's Jack's head emerging from a box, defiance against those who boxed him in. And then there's moments like a decision where you change the shape of a lighter to be more phallic shaped in order to represent the portrait sitter's personality more. A sexual obsession, but we'll touch on that more later. And then there's a blank canvas on an easel for an artist that will never paint again, that fades away into nothing more than a ghost.
But they are so recognisably yours now. That's the amazing thing, especially the Singing Butler. I mean,
And the panel on the right, Jack's Triumph, the Singing Butler features his most famous work. In 1992, it sold for just £3,000, a steal. In 98, £33,000. 2003, £90,000. And then in 2004, it became Scotland's most expensive artwork, fetching £744,800 at auction. A Scottish record that, as of 2025, still stands. Now, because of this book in my hand, a year after that record sale, controversy would erupt. Shockingly, Jack used an artist's manual to reference the pose. And I hope you reacted with the appropriate shock and horror. An artist referencing an artist's reference book. So what, I hear you? But the critics took it as an opportunity to beat Jack some more and call him an amateur. To be honest, I kind of get it where the critics were coming from. This book is very slapstick. It reminds me of Sid James in the Carry On movies.
How about the other half?
Eh?
Another one of those.
Oh, Tar. Have you got a large one?
I've had no complaints so far.
It comes from a certain era, and maybe the humour hasn't aged too well. Some of the poses are unorthodox, to say the least. And this section's called Cheesecake. And I don't know what this vicar's doing. The pictures are very much innuendo and cheap jokes. I think it's rather magical. A reminder of a time when people had a sense of humour and weren't offended by absolutely everything. Yeah, and maybe Jack's been tarnished by the same brush as this book. But let's put this into context. A struggling artist doesn't have money for models. He used reference material in exactly the way it's intended to be used. It's far from a straight copy. In fact, he layered a narrative on top of it, and he very much made it his own. The one twist I wanted to give the Singing Butler was a darkened sky, to represent the nightfall and the end of the day, life. And I had to include this painting, because nothing more symbolises Jack's success than the Singing Butler. Just 3 days after Jack Vettriano's death, an oil painting by graffiti artist Banksy would come to market, and it was a take on Jack Vettriano's The Singing Butler with an environmental twist, and it would fetch £4.3 million. Jack quoted Picasso, and he said, "Some artists borrow, I steal," when talking about the Billy Boys. Now that's the painting that is on the other side of this box. And I must admit that I didn't know too much about the Billy Boys. I've seen it many times, certainly on imagery. But I didn't know what it meant until now. And it turns out that Jack was inspired by a Reservoir Dogs movie poster. And that's why the public can connect with Jack. His subject matter isn't obnoxious or elitist. Instead, it's relatable and brings art to the real people. And that's why he sold millions of prints. But maybe Jack should have kept some secrets to add some mystery to his work. If we never knew it was the Reservoir Dogs, then you can imagine something more magical perhaps. And maybe that's what the critics don't like about him. But the public are a curious mob, and you can't fault a man for his honesty. But I wanted to alter the Billy Boys narrative for my own artistic licence. It feels like Friends on the Beach, and they've just released the ashes of a fallen comrade, one last farewell, and now they somberly walk to the local tavern to divulge anecdotal stories from the fallen comrade's life.
Is the sex not a lot of it fantasy though? It's fantasy rather than perhaps reality.
Well, I don't know what kind of life you've lived, but
Jack was open about his vices. Sex, drugs. He just needed to swap out oil painting for rock and roll.
Hey, miss. Yay, it's me. You big monkey. Oh. What'd you say?
Umbrella.
Umbrellas?
And cup of tea like Daddy.
Oh, a cup of tea like Daddy?
Jack quoted composer Ennio Morricone, hopefully I said that right, in an interview stating his drive came from my heart, my head, and my balls. My heart, my head and my balls. And I did think about a silhouette of a hookah or maybe a line of white dust, but I decided a subtle nod to addiction was more appropriate. Everyone has their vices. Even the guy who relentlessly goes to the gym, that's an addiction. Maybe a good one, but it's still an addiction. Jack was a man of the people, and most of us can identify with the addiction for caffeine or cigarettes. Look, he wasn't polished. He wasn't perfect. He was just real. A human. And that's the thing. The impact of vices can be all-consuming, destroy relationships. As I understand it, Jack was divorced and didn't have children, and openly admitted to being lonely. But the truth is, pain creates better art and artists than happiness ever could. So the next time you tell an artist they are lucky to have a talent, remember it's probably a poisoned chalice, a bit of a curse. Painting is a vice and an obsession.
The idea that really, men had the right to take a swing at their women if they were acting up. I really feel that in Vettriano's work there is a real acceptance that this is all part of the game between men and women, and this kind of stuff is acceptable.
You see that they are about to do something, and then you add whatever's next, which is why it's so interesting when people find them so offensive, because they're obviously adding something really fairly appalling.
I admit that I debated going ahead with this next stage. Maybe the jack-in-the-box metaphor was enough. The spring might be, I don't know, overly mechanical. But I wanted to stay true to my concept. Jack springs back. So as I say, the critics, they tried to pigeonhole Jack. Call him lowbrow and talentless, commercial, stuffed him into a box. But every time they tried to push him down, he bounced right back, just like a jack-in-the-box. So this painting is a metaphor, symbolising defiance, resilience, and a refusal to be beaten down. So it comes from a place of great respect. But I get it, sticking a recently deceased man's head on a child's toy could seem crass. But it's all about context. In the words of Ricky Gervais, offence is not given, it's taken. If you are offended, that's your right, and I don't give a damn. And that's my right. I'm not trying to shock and awe. I'm trying to provoke thought. Art should challenge you, and if it makes you feel something, even if that's discomfort, it's doing its job. And some people do find Jack's work offensive, sexist, misogynist, cheap, even. And I find that ironic because the same people loved Picasso, a darling of the art establishment. His content was similarly themed. The reality is, if life isn't about love, sex and desire, what is it about? So like Jack, I'll live with a little criticism in the pursuit of honesty. Now of course, in a portrait, you have to paint the man. And I painted Jack at the height of his success. Roughly in his 40s, glasses, long hair, a cigarette in his mouth, a finishing touch that comes later. Now I don't condone smoking, but it's a part of his persona, and it just looks cinematic. The portrait deliberately lets the underpainting show through to give a ghost-like feeling, a nod to his passing, but also his lasting spirit that will live on, hung in the homes of millions. And I had to fight my desire to add more structure. I nearly fleshed out the whites of his eyes, but I wanted to recognise his recent death. Knowing when to stop is often the hardest part of being an artist, and I'm satisfied I recognised that moment. Jack worked in a rather dirty workstation. Nothing compared to the filth of, say, Francis Bacon.
Within the studio, in this enclosed space.
But dirty for me. And I wanted to capture that, and actually, one of the final touches of this painting, on that theme, is what will pull this painting together. So, stick around to see that. The palette, I chose a Mars Black over Ivory for a cooler, sadder tone. The rest of the palette is warm but muted, light Naples, red ochre, Venetian red, chosen to reflect love, loss and legacy. Now blue is universal colour for sadness, but I avoided a true blue, opting instead for turquoise, something that still whispers sadness but with life and defiance behind it. Because this isn't just a eulogy, it's a reminder that Jack Vettriano lives on. Not just in memory, but in paint, on canvas, and in the hearts of those who saw something in his work that the critics never could.
Sing me to sleep, sing me to sleep. I'm tired and I want to go to bed. Sing me to sleep, sing me to sleep. And then leave me alone. Don't try to wake me in the morning, 'cause I will be gone. want you to know. Deep in the cell of my heart, I will feel so glad to go. Sing me to sleep, sing me to sleep. I don't want to wake up on my own anymore. Sing to me, sing to me. I don't want to wake up on my own anymore. Don't feel bad for me, I want you to know. Deep in the cell of my heart, I really want to go. There is another world, there is a better world. Well, there must be. Well, there must be.
So as I paint the final touches, including some rather chewed up cigarettes, that final touch I alluded to earlier for Jack's grimy workstation, that's Jack in the Box, a surreal portrait of an artist who beat the odds, faced the backlash and never stopped painting what he loved. Was he successful? Financially? Without a doubt. Was he popular? By the masses? Has he hung around the greatest galleries around the world? Not yet. But give it time. Maybe success isn't a gallery wall, or bags of money. Maybe it's the courage to paint what's true to you. If so, Jack Vettriano was wildly successful. And maybe, just maybe, I'll get there too.